Most people, when asked, would likely name the Battle of Little Bighorn as the greatest U.S. defeat at the hands of Native American forces. Surprisingly, they would be mistaken. The true story lies in a much lesser-known yet devastating encounter. St. Clair's defeat, also called the Battle of the Wabash, an event so severe it echoes as the worst military loss ever suffered by U.S. forces against Native American alliances. Long before American independence was won, a fierce competition for control over the resource-rich lands around the Great Lakes unfolded, drawing Europe's colonial powers into repeated conflicts. British and French ambitions clashed as each nation sought dominance over these territories, and Native American tribes found themselves pulled into a complex network of shifting alliances. Some native tribes supported the French, hoping that their partnership would protect their lands from encroaching colonial interests, while others allied with the British, who offered both trade opportunities and military support. These alliances were far from stable, as tribes assessed the shifting colonial power dynamics to safeguard their own survival and sovereignty. With the end of the American Revolutionary War and the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the geopolitical landscape changed dramatically. Great Britain formally recognized the sovereignty of the United States over lands east of the Mississippi River and south of the Great Lakes, effectively ceding significant territory to the new nation. However, native nations were notably absent from these negotiations, with their land rights disregarded in this sweeping territorial realignment. This exclusion sowed deep distrust and set the stage for further conflicts, as native communities faced increasing pressure from settlers emboldened by the treaty. In the wake of these developments, a powerful alliance of native tribes came together, known as the Northwestern Native Confederacy. This confederation, which included the Cherokee, Iroquois, Delaware, Miami, Ottawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Shawnee, Wabash, and Wyandot nations, united under a common cause: the protection of their ancestral lands north of the Ohio River. Guided by steadfast leaders like Little Turtle of the Miami and Blue Jacket of the Shawnee, the Confederacy firmly rejected the United States' claims to the territory. These leaders emphasized that native sovereignty over their lands remained intact, despite any treaties imposed without their consent, and warned that any U.S. incursion would meet with resistance. Despite having agreed to the terms of the Treaty of Paris, British forces continued to exert influence in the Great Lakes region. Although they officially evacuated their forts, British fur trading posts remained active in the area, in defiance of the treaty's stipulations. Furthermore, the British covertly supported native resistance efforts by supplying them with arms and ammunition, providing the tribes with the resources needed to confront U.S. expansion. This ongoing British involvement added fuel to the already simmering conflict, as native tribes fortified their defenses to counteract the surge of settlers venturing into the fertile Ohio territory. By the late 1780s, hostilities between native forces and American settlers escalated into full-scale skirmishes, driven by both sides' determination to protect their interests. Settlers, enticed by the rich agricultural potential of the land, pushed deeper into native territories, often clashing violently with the Confederated tribes. In turn, the Northwestern Native Confederacy's leaders marshaled their warriors to repel the encroaching settlers, leading to a prolonged and brutal conflict as each side fought tenaciously for control of the contested land. This period marked a critical chapter in the struggle over territory and sovereignty in the early history of the United States, with native nations standing united in their resistance against foreign domination of their lands. In 1790, determined to quell the escalating native resistance, President George Washington authorized a military expedition under Brigadier General Josiah Harmar. Tasked with countering Miami-led raids orchestrated by Chief Little Turtle, Harmar assembled a force of over 1,400 men, composed of both regular soldiers and militia. The campaign began on October 7th as the troops departed from Fort Washington and advanced into the contested Ohio territory. However, within just 2 weeks, Harmar's campaign met with disaster. Near present-day Fort Wayne, Indiana, more than 1,000 warriors from the Northwestern Confederacy launched a surprise attack on the American forces. The results were devastating for the American side. 262 soldiers were killed, 106 wounded, and one-third of the expedition's horses were lost. Forced to retreat, Harmar's defeated troops returned to Fort Washington, leaving behind both men and morale. Although victorious, the native forces also sustained casualties, with estimates suggesting they lost between 120 and 150 warriors. The following year, Washington intensified efforts to dismantle the native resistance. In 1791, he ordered another campaign, this time led by General Arthur St. Clair, who departed from Fort Washington with 1,400 soldiers in September. St. Clair's mission aimed to secure the territory by constructing a series of forts as they advanced northward. Yet, the campaign faced persistent challenges. Desertions, brutal cold, and inadequate supplies left the soldiers weak and demoralized. By the time they reached the Wabash River in early November, the troops were exhausted, their ranks depleted. On the night of November 3rd, St. Clair's weary army camped on a hill near the Wabash River, unaware that over 1,000 native warriors, led by Chiefs Little Turtle and Blue Jacket, had strategically positioned themselves around the camp. At dawn, as soldiers prepared breakfast and stacked their weapons, the native forces launched a swift and decisive attack. The Miami, Shawnee, and Lenape warriors struck first at the unarmed militia, causing panic that quickly spread through the camp. In the chaos, the regulars managed to break their musket stacks and form makeshift lines, firing a desperate volley to push back the attackers. St. Clair himself braved the onslaught, personally leading bayonet charges as bullets narrowly missed him, even tearing his coat and grazing his hair. Despite their resolve, the American troops struggled to hold their ground. The artillery, positioned for defense, failed to impact the advancing native forces, with many shots flying over their heads. Soon, the artillery crews found themselves in hand-to-hand combat as the battle raged around them. Major General Richard Butler, who commanded the Levee Regiment, sustained multiple injuries and ultimately died in his tent. Butler became the first of 4 American generals who would lose their lives in the conflicts with native forces, marking a significant loss for the American side. The native warriors executed their strategy with impressive precision. Their forces flanked the regulars from both sides, effectively encircling the entire U.S. encampment within half an hour. After 3 intense hours of continuous fighting, General St. Clair saw the futility of continuing the battle. With the native forces closing in, he gathered his remaining officers, and in a last-ditch effort, they led a desperate bayonet charge to break through the encirclement. Forced to abandon their supplies and the wounded, the surviving soldiers retreated, narrowly escaping complete annihilation. This confrontation, later known as St. Clair's defeat, remains one of the most significant and devastating defeats in American military history. It underscored the formidable resistance of the Native Confederation and highlighted the complexities of the early American frontier, where native nations fought vigorously to defend their territories against expanding U.S. forces. Little Turtle's forces employed a calculated strategy, allowing St. Clair's troops to break through their encirclement only to chase them down in a relentless pursuit. As the soldiers fled, a detachment from Pennsylvania, led by the resolute Major John Clark, courageously held the rear to cover the retreat. Despite their efforts, Clark was eventually wounded, and the tenuous retreat rapidly devolved into panic and chaos. Soldiers abandoned anything that weighed them down, discarding weapons, cartridge boxes, and pieces of uniform in their desperate bid to escape. General St. Clair, haunted by the scene, later described how the path was littered with the scattered remnants of his men's belongings, a heartbreaking testimony to the battle's devastation. Amid the confusion, Private Stephen Little, one of St. Clair's soldiers, became separated from his comrades and lost his way in the dense forest. Unknowingly, he circled back to the deserted battlefield and took shelter beneath a tree, hiding in silence. From his concealed spot, he watched as the native warriors returned after a 4-mile pursuit, moving through the abandoned camp. The scene was somber and surreal. Warriors divided the supplies, consuming the remnants of the provisions left behind, and attending to the somber task of ending the suffering of the wounded who had been left behind. for Little and those who later heard his account. This moment underscored the brutal reality of the conflict and the unwavering resolve of the native forces to protect their lands. The survivors who managed to escape the relentless pursuit reached Fort Jefferson later that day, a small but critical refuge in the wilderness. Exhausted, traumatized, and grieving the loss of their comrades, they brought with them the somber news of what would soon be remembered as the Battle of the Wabash, also known as St. Clair's defeat. This encounter would go down as one of the most devastating days in U.S. military history. Approximately 85% of St. Clair's force was lost, a staggering casualty rate. Of the 1,400 men who set out, 918 were killed, and 276 were wounded, effectively decimating nearly a quarter of the newly formed U.S. Army. In stark contrast, the Native Confederacy, owing to their skillful tactics and unity, sustained far fewer casualties, with an estimated 20 killed and 40 wounded. The overwhelming losses suffered by the Americans shocked the nation and underscored the strength and resilience of the Native coalition. This defeat demonstrated the fierce resistance that indigenous communities could mount when united in defense of their lands. It also marked a turning point, as the United States recognized the need for a stronger, more prepared military to contend with the challenges posed by the frontier. The Battle of the Wabash thus remains a grim chapter in early American history, a testament to both the cost of expansion and the formidable spirit of those who fought to protect their ancestral territories. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new videos from us. What do you think about today's topic? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found the video helpful, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We hope you had a great time. See you in the next video with even more exciting content. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.